If you're the kind of person who spirals every time a text or comment feels unfair, this is for you. If you don't fix this, you'll keep wrecking nights, relationships, and your own self-respect. Today I'll give you one rule and a few simple lines that change how you react in that moment. We'll use them in a real Friday night text situation where you'd normally lose it. If that sounds like something you need, stay with me. You're standing in your kitchen late at night, the light from the fridge spilling onto the floor while you stare at your phone. A message just came in. Someone else got the promotion, the client, the opportunity, the apology, the chance that should have been yours. Your chest feels tight, your jaw clenches, and part of you wants to throw the phone across the room or fire back a text you know you'll regret in the morning. Here's the hard question. What if the real problem isn't that life is unfair, but that no one ever taught you how to stay steady when it is? What if the emotional chaos after the unfair moment does more damage to your life than the unfair moment itself? When something feels unfair at work, you replay every detail until 2 a.m., feeling smaller and more invisible with each loop. When money feels unfair, someone else's raise, someone else's help, someone else's lucky break, you scroll social media and feel that mix of envy and self-disgust. When relationships feel unfair, you flip between anger and pleading, between wanting to cut people off and wanting them to finally see your worth. The cost of this isn't just a bad evening, it's lost sleep, shaky focus the next day, weeks of low confidence, and that quiet erosion of self-respect when you see yourself spiral again. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to respond differently. You'll learn how to pause before you explode or collapse. You'll learn how to let an unfair moment sting without letting it define your whole identity. And you'll walk away with a few simple lines you can say to yourself and to other people that help you hold your ground, instead of begging or attacking. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. At the core of Stoic practice is a simple idea: you don't control the world, but you do control how you meet it. As Marcus hints in Meditations, the insult, the loss, the rejection, the unfair judgment, those are outside you. What you add on top of them in your mind is what burns you. Right now, when something feels unfair, your mind rushes in with a story. This always happens to me. People never see my effort. I'll never catch up. I'm just not that person who wins. You don't even realize that you're allowed to question that story. It feels like a fact, so your body reacts like it's an emergency. We're not here to pretend life is fair. It isn't. Some people start with more contacts, more money, more support. Some bosses definitely play favorites. Some partners and family members genuinely don't treat you with the respect you deserve. The Stoic move is not to minimize that, but to refuse to give away the only part that's actually yours, your response. When you lose that, you lose twice. First, in the situation itself. Second, in the way you talk to yourself afterward. That second loss is the one we're going after today. So here's what we're going to do together. First, we're going to tear apart the belief that your feelings are in charge of you when something unfair happens, and show you how to create a tiny space between the hit and your reaction. Next, we're going to build one clear rule for how you respond to unfair messages, emails, and comments so you don't keep sending things you regret. Then, we'll look at how to handle unfairness around money and recognition without falling into envy or self-sabotage. After that, we'll tackle unfairness in relationships, when someone crosses your line, minimizes your pain, or keeps moving the goalposts, and how to hold a boundary without turning cold or cruel. And finally, we'll put it all together in one real-life scenario so you can actually feel what it's like to stay steady on a night when everything in you wants to lose it. As you move through this, you might notice some resistance. Part of you may say, but if I don't get angry, I'm letting them win, or if I don't spiral, I'm not taking this seriously enough. That's one of the big myths we'll dismantle, that calm equals weakness, or that being steady means you don't care. You'll see that calm can actually be the most powerful way to care for yourself, for your future, and even for the people around you who have to live with your reactions. So for now, just notice how your body feels when you remember something unfair that happened recently. Maybe it was a performance review that ignored your contribution, a friend who bailed when you needed them, an ex who seems to be thriving while you're still putting yourself back together. Feel the tightness, the heat, the urge to argue your case in your head. You don't have to fix it yet. You're just going to learn how not to let that feeling drive the car every single time. In a bit, we'll walk through a Friday night situation where this work actually saves you from exploding at someone you care about and waking up the next morning ashamed of what you said. You'll see yourself on the edge of the old spiral, and you'll practice the new way through. For now, stay with me, because the tools you're about to learn are the difference between feeling like life is always doing something to you and realizing you can stay steady, even when it feels deeply unfair. You're going to start by changing one thing. You're no longer allowed to react in the first wave of emotion when something feels unfair. That first wave is where most of the damage happens. It's where you send the angry text, write the email that gets forwarded to your boss's boss, or make the comment that turns a small conflict into a full argument. If you never change this habit, you'll keep losing opportunities you could have kept, relationships you could have protected, and respect you could have earned simply by giving yourself a tiny bit of space. The reason this matters is simple. That first wave of emotion is almost never about what actually happened. It's about everything you think the moment means about you. You're not reacting to the missed promotion, you're reacting to the idea that you'll never be chosen. You're not reacting to the ignored text, you're reacting to the fear that you're not valued. You're not reacting to the unfair bill or unexpected expense, you're reacting to the story that you're falling behind and running out of time. When you act from that story, you make decisions that don't line up with who you're trying to become. Here's why this shift works. The human brain needs only a few seconds of space to interrupt the automatic link between emotion and action. When you refuse to act in the first wave, the emotion still comes, but you're no longer held hostage by it. Your mind starts to settle, and the intensity drops just enough for you to choose instead of explode. This is how a calmer, more focused version of you responds instead of reacting. Even a small pause resets the entire trajectory of the moment. You're going to use one simple sentence to create that interruption. I'll respond once I've settled. That's it. You can say it out loud, whisper it under your breath, or just let it pass through your mind. It's short enough to remember when you're stressed and strong enough to break the old pattern. You're not denying your emotion, you're refusing to let it steer you. Imagine you're at work, checking your email between meetings. A Slack message pops up from your manager saying the team is going with someone else's idea, someone who barely contributed. You feel that flash of heat under your skin, the kind that makes your fingers start typing before you've even decided what you want to say. The old reaction is immediate. Seriously? After everything I put in? You write a frustrated reply, maybe delete it, rewrite it, and then send something defensive that sounds more emotional than you meant. Within minutes, you regret it, and you start imagining how your manager read it, how it might look later, how this might affect your next review. But now imagine the new response. You still feel the heat, still feel the unfairness, but instead of typing through it, you stop. You breathe once. You say in your mind, I'll respond once I've settled. You click away from the message for a minute. Maybe you take a sip of water, maybe you just stare at a blank screen. That short pause is enough to shift your tone. When you return, you ask a simple, steady question. Can you share what led to the final decision? I want to make sure I'm improving in the right direction. It's calm. It's grounded. It protects your dignity. And it opens a door instead of slamming one shut. Your tiny action today is simple. Pick one conversation, text, email, Slack, or DM, where you tend to react too fast, and commit to using the line I'll respond once I've settled the next time something feels unfair. Write it in your notes app if you need to. You're giving yourself permission not to respond in the heat of the moment. Right now, take 3 slow breaths with me. In, hold, and out. Again, hold, and out. One more time, hold, and out. Notice how even 3 breaths give you more space than you had a moment ago. That's the feeling you're creating in real time when you refuse to act in the first emotional wave. It doesn't make the unfairness disappear, but it keeps it from controlling you. Hold on to this one line, because it's going to matter later. When we get to that Friday night scene, you're going to see exactly how this sentence prevents you from saying something that could stick with you for months. You need one more shift if you want real emotional control. Stop assuming that every unfair moment requires an immediate judgment about what it means. This is one of the fastest ways people deepen their own suffering. Something goes wrong, someone treats you poorly, something doesn't add up at work or in your finances, and instead of letting the moment be one event, you turn it into a verdict about your entire identity. You declare yourself behind, invisible, unworthy, or unlucky. The stakes are high because once you make that judgment, your mind will find proof everywhere, and you'll start reacting not to the moment in front of you, but to the story you've already decided is true. The practice here is to delay interpretation. Not deny. Not ignore. Delay. When you delay interpretation, you shrink the emotional distortion that happens when you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed. This matters because when you interpret too quickly, you reinforce emotional patterns that keep you stuck. You start living inside your assumptions, not your reality. And if you never change this habit, you'll keep walking into situations already defeated, already bracing for what's obviously going to happen, and already assuming people's motives without giving yourself even a minute of clarity. That kind of mindset quietly shapes your tone, your choices, and your confidence in ways that cost you far more than the original unfair moment ever did. Here's why this works. When you delay interpretation, you're giving your mind space to cool down enough to see the situation without the emotional charge. It lowers the intensity of what Marcus in Meditations might call the added stories. Your brain is built to fill in the blanks quickly, especially when you're under stress, but it's not built to always fill them accurately. By waiting, even a few minutes, you shift from survival mode to clarity mode. Decisions made in clarity tend to align with who you want to be, not who you become when you're overwhelmed. Delayed interpretation isn't passivity, it's strategy. It protects your energy and helps you respond more intelligently. You're going to use one simple line to create that buffer: I don't have the full picture yet. Say it to yourself when something feels unfair, when someone disappoints you, when a bill hits harder than you expected, or when you see someone else getting what you wanted. The sentence is a boundary against your own assumptions. It keeps you from collapsing into self-blame or exploding in accusation. It buys you time to see things as they are, not as your stress paints them. Let me put you in a real moment. It's Thursday afternoon. You're working remotely from your apartment, finishing up a report. You check your phone, and you see your roommate posted a picture at a bar with a mutual friend, someone who told you earlier they were too busy to hang out tonight. That heat rises instantly. Your mind jumps straight to, they didn't want to see me. They lied. People just don't value me as much. You feel that sting of unfairness, and the old reaction kicks in. You start typing a long, emotionally charged text. Wow, guess you weren't too busy after all. You imagine the argument that will follow, the explanations, the defensiveness. Part of you wants the fight because it matches how hurt you feel. But now imagine you pause. You don't try to convince yourself you're not hurt. You simply say, I don't have the full picture yet. The sentence doesn't remove the emotion, it keeps it from deciding the meaning. You put the phone down. 10 minutes later, the friend messages you, hey, I'm sorry if that looked weird. I wasn't planning to go out, but I ran into them when I went to grab takeout. Suddenly the whole story looks different. Your emotion was valid, but the conclusion wasn't. And because you delayed interpretation, you didn't start a fight, you didn't damage the relationship, and you didn't give your inner critic more ammunition. You protected yourself by waiting. Your tiny action today is this: write the sentence, I don't have the full picture yet, somewhere you'll see it, your phone wallpaper, a sticky note on your laptop, or pinned at the top of a notes app. The next time something feels unfair, you'll use it before letting your mind run away with assumptions. Take a slow breath with me right now. In, hold, and out. As you breathe, imagine one unfair moment from the last week that hit you hard. See if you can look at it again while saying, I don't have the full picture yet. Notice how the emotion loosens just a little. Notice how the situation becomes less heavy. You're not denying your pain, you're protecting your clarity. That's what this work is about. Hold on to this practice, because soon we're going to stress test it in a situation where your assumptions could easily blow up an entire evening. It's the moment when everything in you wants to jump to conclusions, and where the smallest pause changes everything. You're going to build one rule that takes the chaos out of unfair interactions. You only respond from your values, not your feelings. That means when something feels unfair, an email that dismisses your work, a partner's comment that hits the wrong nerve, a bill that shows an unexpected charge, you don't let the immediate emotion dictate your tone. You pause long enough to choose the version of yourself you want represented in the reply. The stakes are real here. If you don't build this rule, you'll keep switching between overreacting and underreacting, apologizing too fast or attacking too quickly, and every unfair moment will pull you away from the person you're trying to become. This rule is how you stop letting temporary emotions create permanent consequences. What makes this so powerful is that emotions are unstable by design. They spike, crash, distort, and fade. Values don't. Values stay the same on good days, bad days, payday, breakup day, sick day, and everything in between. When you respond from values, you anchor yourself to something stable. You stop being tossed around by every mood swing or every person's behavior. When you answer from a value, like clarity, dignity, honesty, steadiness, you're choosing the direction of your life instead of letting the moment drag you. This is how a steadier version of you moves through conflict. Not emotionless, but intentional. Not detached, but self-respecting. It's the difference between reacting to win the moment and responding to build a life you can stand behind. You're going to use one sentence to enforce this rule. Let me answer this in a way I'm proud of tomorrow. Say that to yourself before responding to anything that hits you the wrong way. It forces you out of the emotional tunnel. It pulls you into the future, where your wiser self is already watching. Tomorrow you doesn't want you to send the snarky text, write the dramatic paragraph, or agree to something that violates your boundaries. Tomorrow you want steadiness, clarity, and self-respect. This sentence puts you back in touch with that version of yourself. Let's put you in a familiar scene. You're sitting at your desk in a shared workspace, or maybe in your living room working from home. You've spent the whole week cleaning up after a team member's mistakes, and everyone knows it. A new email comes in from your supervisor, and instead of acknowledging your efforts, it highlights that team member's incredible initiative. It hits you right in the chest. You feel dismissed, overlooked, and maybe even disrespected. The old reaction shows up immediately. You start typing an email pointing out every detail you handled, trying to prove your worth. Your typing gets faster, your breathing gets shallow, and the email becomes longer and sharper. You're not writing from clarity, you're writing from hurt. And because of that, the message reads more emotional than you intend, and you know that tone will come back to haunt you. Now imagine you stop. You don't deny the sting. You acknowledge it quietly. And you say to yourself, let me answer this in a way I'm proud of tomorrow. You lean back in your chair. You breathe once. You delete the defensive paragraph. You write something grounded instead. Thanks for the update. For visibility, I've also been coordinating the back-end corrections to ensure everything stays on schedule. Happy to walk through the details if it's useful. It's calm, confident, and honest. It doesn't beg for recognition, but it also doesn't erase your contribution. It's the tone you actually want associated with you. And when you read it tomorrow, you'll feel steady, not embarrassed. Here's your tiny action today. Choose one value that will guide your responses for the next 24 hours. Just one. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's calm. Maybe it's dignity. Write it somewhere visible. Every time something feels unfair, ask, what response matches this value? This turns vague emotional control into a concrete behavior you can repeat. Take a slow breath with me right now. In, hold, and out. Again, hold, and out. Feel your shoulders drop even a little. Now imagine one unfair moment from this week. Picture yourself replying from the value you chose instead of the emotion you felt. Notice how different your tone becomes. Notice how much stronger you feel when you imagine tomorrow you reading that message. You're practicing emotional integrity in real time, and your body knows the difference. There's a moment coming later, yes, in that Friday night story, where this line becomes the turning point. It saves you from saying something sharp that your future self would carry like a weight. So stay with me, because when we get there, you'll feel exactly why this rule matters. You're going to learn how to hold your emotional ground when someone moves the goalposts on you. This is one of the most common forms of unfairness in everyday life. Someone asks for something, you deliver it, and suddenly they want more. Someone agrees to a plan, then changes the expectations at the last minute. Someone shifts the rules, not because the situation changed, but because they assumed you'd adapt, absorb the shock, and keep the peace. If you never address this pattern, you'll end up exhausted, resentful, and confused about why you feel so drained after every interaction with them. The stakes are high because goalpost moving slowly erodes your confidence. It trains you to expect instability. It makes you overwork, overgive, and overexplain just to avoid conflict. The shift you're going to make here is learning to anchor yourself in your original agreement instead of the other person's shifting expectations. The moment you stop doing that, the other person's emotions, and sometimes their inconsistencies, start steering your choices. Emotional control doesn't mean suppressing how you feel, it means refusing to let other people's impulsive shifts dictate your behavior. When you learn to stand firm on an agreement, you create a boundary that's not aggressive or reactive. It's simply steady. And steadiness is one of the strongest forms of self-respect you can carry into any unfair situation. Here's why this works. When someone moves the goalposts, they're usually operating from emotion, urgency, or habit, not intention. Your job isn't to match that energy. Your job is to hold the original frame. This brings the interaction back to clarity. Most conflict in these moments comes from misaligned expectations, not malicious intent. By staying rooted in what was originally agreed upon, you create a stable reference point that prevents the conversation from spiraling into blame or guilt. It also communicates something powerful about your identity. You're someone who operates from clarity, not chaos. You're someone who respects your time, your limits, and your commitments. That steadiness shapes how people treat you. Your exact line in these situations is this: I'm staying with what we originally agreed to. Say it calmly. No apology. No long explanation. No defensiveness. It resets the moment without escalating it. It reminds both of you what the initial commitment was, and it puts the responsibility for the shift back where it belongs. You're not accusing. You're not arguing. You're clarifying, something emotions can't do, but your values can. Let's drop you into a real North American moment. It's a Saturday morning. You promised a friend you'd help them move a few boxes from their apartment to their storage unit. You cleared 2 hours in your schedule for it. When you show up, you see not a few boxes, but an entire living room full of furniture, bags, clothes, and things that clearly need a full day, or maybe 2, to move. Your friend laughs and says, I know I said it was a couple boxes, but once I started packing, everything kind of came out. You don't mind staying longer, right? The old reaction kicks in fast. You think, seriously? You knew this wasn't just a couple boxes. You feel pressured. You feel manipulated. A piece of you wants to say yes to avoid conflict, and another piece of you wants to snap at them for not respecting your time. The unfairness hits you in the stomach. You either cave or resent them all day, or you react sharply and damage the friendship. Both options feel terrible. But now imagine the new response. You take one slow breath. You remind yourself, I don't have to match their urgency. I can stay with what we agreed. You look at them with calm honesty and say, I'm staying with what we originally agreed to. I can help with the boxes for the next 2 hours, but I can't commit to the rest. Their face might show surprise, but you'll see something else too: clarity. You didn't attack them. You didn't collapse. You held your boundary without bitterness. And the emotional storm you felt inside starts to settle immediately because you acted from steadiness instead of frustration. Your tiny action today is this: write the sentence, "I'm staying with what we originally agreed to," somewhere you can access easily: Notes app, reminders, or even a screenshot as your phone background. Use it anytime someone shifts expectations on you without checking in first. This gives you a default response that protects your energy without creating unnecessary conflict. Now take a moment with me. Breathe in, hold, and breathe out slowly. Again, hold, and out. Picture one recent moment where someone moved the goalposts on you: a coworker who kept adding tasks to a project you didn't sign up for, a family member who kept changing plans, a partner who shifted expectations halfway through a conversation. Let yourself feel the frustration you felt then. Now imagine yourself saying, calmly and steadily, "I'm staying with what we originally agreed to." Notice how your body softens a little. Notice how your mind feels clearer when you imagine responding from steadiness instead of resentment. You're practicing emotional control from the inside out. And keep this with you, because in the story coming later, you're going to see exactly how dangerous goalpost moving can be in a heated moment, and how powerful it is when you stop letting other people's last-minute shifts rewrite your limits. You're going to learn how to stop taking other people's emotional swings as proof that you've done something wrong. This is one of the most draining forms of unfairness because it twists your sense of responsibility. Someone gets short with you, someone withdraws, someone acts irritated or cold, and instead of pausing, you immediately assume you caused it. You start apologizing, over-explaining, or fixing things that aren't yours to fix. If you don't change this pattern, your emotional stability will always depend on the mood of the person in front of you. That's a fragile way to live, and it keeps you stuck in a cycle where the slightest shift in someone else's tone can ruin your entire day. The shift you're making here is realizing that other people's emotions are information, not instructions. Someone else's frustration doesn't automatically mean you failed. Someone else's silence doesn't automatically mean they're upset with you. Someone else's rushed tone doesn't automatically mean you need to fix something. When you internalize their mood, you let them rewrite your entire emotional landscape without your consent. Emotional control means you learn to separate what belongs to you from what belongs to them. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's how you protect your nervous system from being hijacked every time someone else is having a bad moment. Here's why this works. Most emotional swings in people around you have nothing to do with you. They're dealing with their own stress, pressure, expectations, deadlines, insecurities, and stories. When you stop personalizing their reactions, you give yourself space to stay grounded. You also stop assuming responsibility for problems you didn't create. This matters because if you're always fixing or adjusting to someone else's mood, you train them, without realizing it, that you will absorb their emotional spillover every time. That becomes a pattern. But when you respond from grounded clarity, you shift the dynamic toward mutual responsibility. A calmer version of you understands this instinctively. You're allowed to remain steady even when someone else is not. Your exact line for these moments is simple and incredibly effective: "I'll give this some space and we can talk when things feel calmer." You're not accusing them of anything. You're not assuming you're at fault. You're simply refusing to get pulled into the emotional turbulence of the moment. This line stops you from overreacting, over-explaining, or over-functioning. It also signals that you're not abandoning the conversation, you're just choosing a better moment for both of you. Let's take you into a scene. You're driving home from work, and your partner calls you, sounding irritated. You say, "Hey, what's up?" and they respond with a sharp, "I don't know, I'm just dealing with a lot right now." The tone hits you immediately. Your stomach drops. Your old reaction switches on. You start scanning for what you might have done wrong. Did you forget something important? Did you phrase something poorly earlier? Should you apologize? Should you offer help? Should you say nothing? The uncertainty makes you anxious. You start trying to repair a situation you don't even understand, and suddenly the weight of their mood becomes your responsibility. But now imagine the new response. You hear the tension, but you don't take it personally. You don't jump into fixer mode. You don't turn this into a test of your worth. Instead, you take one breath, steady your voice, and say, "I'll give this some space and we can talk when things feel calmer." The line is gentle but firm. It tells them you're not abandoning them, but you're also not absorbing their emotions as your own. It creates a break in the emotional static. A few hours later, your partner texts, "Sorry I was short earlier. Work was intense today and I took it out on you." That's the moment you realize the truth. None of this was ever about you. And because you didn't personalize it, you didn't create unnecessary conflict or emotional fatigue for either of you. Your tiny action today is simple. Choose one relationship, partner, friend, co-worker, parent, where you regularly take responsibility for their mood. For the next 48 hours, commit to using the line, "I'll give this some space and we can talk when things feel calmer," the next time you feel pulled into their emotion. You'll feel the tension in your body wanting to fix things immediately, but you're training yourself to separate your identity from someone else's temporary state. Right now, take a breath in, hold, and let it out slowly. Again, in, hold, and out. Bring to mind one moment from this week when someone else's shift in tone made you feel anxious or guilty. See the moment again, but this time imagine yourself pausing and saying, "I'll give this some space and we can talk when things feel calmer." Notice how your shoulders drop a little. Notice how your breath comes easier. You're letting go of a responsibility that was never yours to carry. That's emotional control, reclaiming space inside yourself that you used to give away automatically. Hold on to this line, because when we get to the Friday night scene later, there will be a moment where someone else's emotional spike could pull you into an argument you're not responsible for. And you're going to see exactly how powerful it is when you choose clarity instead of taking the bait. You're going to learn how to stop negotiating with your own self-respect when things feel unfair. This is one of the most subtle ways unfairness affects you, not through what other people do, but through what you start allowing, excusing, or justifying in yourself. When you feel overlooked, dismissed, or disrespected, you instinctively begin to shrink your expectations. You lower your standards, you say yes to things that drain you, and you accept treatment you'd never advise a friend to tolerate. If you don't change this, every unfair moment becomes a doorway to self-abandonment. And the cost is enormous: your confidence, your boundaries, and your sense of who you are. The shift you're making here is learning to return to your non-negotiables. A non-negotiable is something you don't sacrifice just because the moment is stressful or someone else is inconsistent. It's a line that protects your integrity. When you hold your non-negotiables, you're signaling to yourself, not just to others, that you're someone whose dignity doesn't bend just because someone else is having a mood, a bad day, or a manipulative moment. Unfairness tests your self-respect more than anything else. When you cave, you feel it immediately in your body, the heaviness in your chest, the sinking feeling in your stomach, the internal voice that whispers, "You didn't have to give in like that." But when you stand firm, your body also tells you, through steadiness, relief, and clarity, that you honored yourself. Here's why this matters. When you have no clear non-negotiables, every situation becomes a negotiation. Every unfair moment becomes a puzzle where you're trying to figure out what you're allowed to feel, say, or do. But when you know your non-negotiables, respectful tone, reasonable timing, mutual effort, honest communication, or basic boundaries, you have a stable compass. You no longer ask, "What do they want from me?" You ask, "What aligns with my dignity?" That shift alone can prevent you from sliding into resentment, overgiving, or emotional self-erasure. A calmer version of you thrives on this clarity. It's not about being rigid, it's about knowing where you stop and the unfairness stops too. Your exact line for this practice is, "That doesn't work for me." It's one of the simplest and strongest boundary lines in the English language. It's neutral. It doesn't accuse, attack, or explain. It doesn't apologize for existing. And it makes space for you to protect your dignity without escalating conflict. You can use it with anyone: coworkers, family, friends, partners, roommates, because the line isn't about controlling them, it's about representing yourself clearly. Let's place you in a real North American moment. It's late on a Wednesday evening. You're tired after a long day. You've been looking forward to having a quiet night to catch up on a show or clean your space. Suddenly, a friend texts, "Hey, can you talk right now? I'm having a rough night." You ask if everything is okay, and they respond with a long message full of frustration, not about life, but about you. They're upset you didn't text back earlier, or that you didn't react the way they wanted to something minor. You feel blindsided. The unfairness hits instantly. You feel pressure to defend yourself, to soothe them, or to drop everything just to make sure they don't stay upset. That's the old reaction, self-respect on hold, emotional caretaking switched on. But now imagine the new response. You take one slow breath. You see the moment clearly, their emotions are real, but their expectations aren't your responsibility. You don't abandon yourself to stabilize them. You simply text back, "I hear you're upset. That doesn't work for me. We can talk when things are calm." It feels strange the first time. Your body expects pushback. But what you're doing is telling both of you the truth. This version of interaction isn't something you participate in. You're protecting your energy, your identity, and your dignity. Later, when emotions settle, the conversation is clearer, calmer, and far healthier than anything that would have happened if you had caved in the moment. Your tiny action today: define one non-negotiable that you will not bend for the next week. Just one. Maybe it's "I don't respond to disrespectful tone." Maybe it's "I won't agree to last-minute obligations." Maybe it's "I don't engage when someone is yelling." Keep it simple. Write it down and read it once in the morning and once at night. Your brain needs repetition to trust the new pattern, especially if you're used to self-sacrifice. Pause with me for a slow practice moment. Breathe in, hold, and out. Again, in, hold, and out. Now picture one recent moment where you abandoned a non-negotiable, where you said yes but meant no, where you tolerated something that tightened your chest, where you softened yourself to avoid conflict. Feel that moment again, not to judge yourself, but to recognize the cost. Now imagine responding instead with, "That doesn't work for me." Feel how your shoulders lift. Feel how your breath opens up. That's your body recognizing alignment. That's what self-respect feels like. Keep this practice close. Because in the Friday night story coming up, you'll be in a moment where someone's frustration pushes right up against your limits. And you're going to see exactly what happens when you use this one sentence to stop the familiar pattern of abandoning yourself in unfair moments. You're going to learn how to stop chasing closure from people who benefit from keeping you emotionally off balance. This is one of the deepest traps when life feels unfair. Someone gives you mixed signals, half answers, delayed responses, vague explanations, or sudden shifts in energy, and you feel compelled to keep trying to understand what you did wrong or what you're supposed to fix. You reread their messages, replay conversations, and wait for them to finally give you the clarity you think will settle your mind. But if you never change this pattern, you'll spend huge portions of your emotional life depending on people who have no incentive to give you peace. Closure-seeking becomes a leash they can tug with a single message. The shift here is recognizing that closure isn't something other people give you, it's something you choose. When you let someone else control the narrative by waiting for their explanation, apology, or validation, you hand over your emotional stability. Emotional control means reclaiming that power. You stop letting unclear people drain your focus. You stop interpreting their inconsistency as your failure. And you stop thinking the only way to move on is for them to finally say the right thing. Most of the time, the pattern of unfairness is the closure. The inconsistency is the answer. The emotional seesaw is the message. You just haven't let yourself treat it as enough. Here's why this works. The brain hates unfinished stories. When someone acts unfairly, it creates an emotional gap that your mind desperately wants to fill, because unfinished tension feels like danger. That's why you keep checking your phone. That's why you keep imagining conversations. That's why you can't focus. But closure doesn't come from forcing an ending, it comes from deciding where the story ends for you. When you stop waiting for someone else to tie the bow, you stop living in emotional suspense. You return to the present instead of camping out in hypotheticals. This is how a more grounded version of you protects your peace. You're not avoiding the truth, you're refusing to outsource your healing. Your exact line for ending these cycles is, "I'm choosing to move forward without more explanation." It's powerful because it breaks the emotional waiting game. It doesn't blame the other person, and it doesn't demand anything from them. It simply reclaims your agency. You can say it out loud, write it privately, or include a softened version in a conversation if needed. But the key is that you're closing the loop internally so someone else's inconsistency doesn't keep you frozen. Let's put you in a moment you've probably lived before. You're sitting on your couch late in the evening, scrolling through a dating app message thread or a conversation with someone you've been talking to for weeks. Things were going well. They were consistent, engaged, and curious. Then slowly, without explanation, they pulled back. Longer gaps between replies. Shorter messages. A shift in tone you can't quite name but definitely feel. The unfairness hits you hard because nothing obvious happened. You start rereading old messages trying to locate the moment where it changed. You debate sending a long text for clarity. You wonder if you're overreacting or if you're missing something important. You stay stuck in limbo, half waiting for them to return to the version of themselves you liked, and half blaming yourself for driving them away. Now imagine the new response. You feel the confusion, the disappointment, the sense of unfairness, but you don't chase. You stop scrolling the thread. You stop trying to decode their shift. You take one breath and say, "I'm choosing to move forward without more explanation." You're not erasing the connection, you're ending the suspense. You're choosing to protect your present instead of living inside their inconsistency. Maybe later they come back with an explanation. Maybe they don't. But either way, you've removed the emotional hook from your chest. You're no longer waiting for someone else to release you. You released you. Your tiny action today: choose one situation, someone you're waiting on, a conversation that fizzled, a reply that never came, a weird energy shift that left you overthinking. Write one sentence beneath it: "I'm choosing to move forward without more explanation." This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're reclaiming your ability to function. It stops the mental loop from draining your focus for hours or days at a time. Let's take a slow practice moment together. In, hold, and out. Again, in, hold, and out. Now bring to mind one place where you're still waiting for a message, apology, or explanation to make the story feel complete. Feel the tension in your chest or stomach. Imagine yourself gently placing that tension down beside you, not rejecting it, just setting it down so it's not tightening your grip. Now imagine saying, "I'm choosing to move forward without more explanation." Notice the subtle shift inside you, the sense that you are allowed to stop carrying this weight. You're not giving up, you're letting go of the part that's hurting you. Keep this line close. Because in the Friday night story coming next, you'll hit a moment where someone's inconsistency pulls at your emotions hard. You'll feel the urge to demand clarity, to confront, to spiral. And you'll see exactly how this sentence, this choice, keeps you from walking straight into a conflict that would have left you drained for days. It's late on a Friday night, the kind where the week's pressure is still humming in your body even though work is technically over. You're sitting on your couch with a takeout container beside you, half watching a show you're not really following. Your phone lights up with a message from someone you care about, someone you've been trying to build something steady with. Earlier in the week, they'd canceled plans last minute, saying they were overwhelmed. You believed them, even though it stung. Tonight, they said they might want to talk later, which left you in that familiar limbo between waiting and trying not to wait. And now the message finally comes through: "Actually, I'm out with friends right now. Didn't think I'd feel up for it, but here I am. Hope you're good." The unfairness hits instantly. Not because they went out, that's their right, but because they'd left you feeling like you were too much, only to have energy for someone else. Your chest tightens. That old story rushes in: people always treat you like a backup plan. You feel the heat rise in your face, the urge to fire back something sharp, maybe something like, "Wow, guess you weren't too overwhelmed after all." Your thumbs hover over the keyboard. This is the exact kind of moment that used to spiral into an argument, or worse, a night you'd regret. But this time, something stops you. You hear the sentence from earlier, "I'll respond once I've settled." You set the phone down on the couch cushion. You lean back against the sofa, your breath shaky but slowing. This is the first idea coming into play, the pause that interrupts the first emotional wave. Without it, you know exactly what would happen. You'd send a reactive text, they'd get defensive, you'd escalate, and the night would unravel into a mess of blame and bruised feelings. But you're not letting the moment decide for you. Not tonight. You breathe once more and remember the second idea, "I don't have the full picture yet." You're not pretending you're not hurt. You simply acknowledge that interpreting everything through the lens of "they don't value me" won't help you see clearly. Maybe they are being inconsiderate. Maybe they're avoiding emotional discomfort. Maybe they're just not thinking. There's plenty of time to decide what this moment means, but not now, not while your emotions are still sharp. That line gives you enough distance to prevent the spiral from tightening around you. 10 minutes pass. You get up and put the takeout container in the trash. You wash your hands slowly. The tension is still there, but softened. When you sit back down, another message comes in, "Sorry for the late update. I know we said maybe we could talk tonight, but I just kind of needed a change of energy. Didn't mean to leave you hanging." The message isn't cruel, but it's also not fully acknowledging how their pattern affects you. This is the moment where the old version of you would pour your heart out in a long message, explaining every disappointment and asking what you did wrong. Or you'd swing the other way, be cold, short, and passive-aggressive. But you hear a different line now, "That doesn't work for me." You type slowly, deliberately, "I get that plans shift. When we say we'll talk and then there's no follow-up, that doesn't work for me. I want to be on the same page, so let's check in next time so neither of us feels off." It's calm. It's honest. It honors your experience without attacking them. Your hands tremble slightly as you send it, not from fear, but from self-respect. You didn't collapse. You didn't over-explain. You didn't chase. You named a non-negotiable without anger. A few minutes later, another message appears, "You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I should have checked in. I appreciate you saying it calmly." It's not a perfect response, but it's real. They're not defensive, and you can feel the tone shift. The conversation no longer feels like you're auditioning for someone's interest or fighting for emotional scraps. You're two adults clarifying expectations. But the moment isn't over. They follow up with, "Can we talk now?" Your stomach drops slightly. The old pattern would drag you right back into a real-time emotional discussion when the tension is still fresh. You feel the pull, the desire to settle things immediately, to smooth it out. But you remember the line that protects you in these exact moments, "I'll give this some space and we can talk when things feel calmer." So you type, "Let's talk tomorrow when we're both clearer. I want the conversation to go well." You set the phone face down. You take a breath. The room feels different, lighter somehow. Not because everything is resolved, but because you stayed steady in a moment that would have wrecked your night before. You didn't let unfairness pull you into self-blame or emotional chaos. You kept your dignity intact. For the first time in a long time, you feel the difference between reacting and responding. You feel what it's like to hold your boundaries without anger, to claim your clarity without demanding closure, and to choose the version of yourself you'll be proud of tomorrow. And as you sit there in the quiet of your living room, you realize something: emotional control doesn't remove the unfair moments. It simply stops them from running your life. The whole lesson you've just walked through has been about shifting from reacting to responding, from letting unfair moments shape your identity to choosing how you meet them. Emotional control isn't about pretending you don't feel frustrated or disappointed. It's about not letting those feelings dictate your behavior. It's the difference between being pulled around by every spike in emotion and becoming someone who can stay steady, even when the moment feels disrespectful, confusing, or deeply unfair. First, you saw how the first emotional wave is where most damage happens, and how pausing before you respond protects your future from your feelings. Then you learned how delaying interpretation keeps you from turning a single moment into a story about your worth. Next, you built the habit of answering from your values instead of your frustration, giving tomorrow's version of you something to be proud of. After that, you learned how to stand firm when people move the goalposts, using steadiness, not anger, to protect your time and energy. You also learned how to stop absorbing other people's emotions as if they were proof that you failed, creating space for conversations to happen when both sides are calm. Then you saw how holding onto your non-negotiables prevents you from shrinking yourself when things feel unfair. And finally, you learned that closure doesn't come from people who keep you off balance, it comes from choosing where the story ends for you. In the vignette, you watched all of this come together in one Friday night moment, showing exactly how these tools shift your emotional life from chaotic to intentional. Here are 3 things you can do today to anchor this work. First, before you respond to anything emotionally loaded, use the line, "I'll respond once I've settled." Say it out loud if you need to. Second, choose one non-negotiable for the next week and protect it relentlessly. Third, pick one situation where you've been waiting for someone else's explanation and quietly say, "I'm choosing to move forward without more explanation." These 3 actions will change how you feel in your body and how you show up in your relationships. If this resonated, the next lesson you'll want to watch is the one on emotional endurance, how to stay grounded when stress builds up day after day and you feel yourself reaching your limit. It's where we go deeper into how to keep your center when life keeps pushing. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.